Welcome back! Dr. Shannon Coates is with us for part 2 of this discussion on building neurodiversity-inclusive voice studios, and we're picking up just where we left off. Can we talk about autism and how that might typically present in the singers that we're working with?
Let me talk first about sensory and sensory processing. Let me talk about that first. So sensory processing, or processing the information that we receive from our senses, that is a fairly, and processing things in a couple of different ways. One can be that I am getting all of the information and my brain cannot filter effectively so that I'm able to stay in touch with the thing that I want to pay attention to. And so that is a pretty typical autistic experience in terms of sensory processing. And what that can look like in the voice studio is, as an autistic person, I may come into the voice studio, and especially if I've had a day at school or a day at work, where I've been working very hard to sort of fit in, mask, if you will, appear typical, follow all the rules. When I come into the voice studio, then the temperature in the room is hot or cold. The light is too strong. I can hear the fan. I can also hear the cat in the background. I can also hear, perhaps at a home studio, I can also hear someone, banging around in the kitchen. The floor is weirdly smooth, or my socks aren't fitting correctly, or the pain in my, my finger that I've been ignoring all day, I've been working very hard to ignore all day, I can no longer ignore. Maybe I also have a headache. All of those things in a neurotypical person, I as an holistic person am going to be able to block all of those things out, filter all of those things out. My stomach ache, my finger, whatever. Especially folks who menstruate, we have been taught to ignore that. Don't let on. Everything's fine. Just get through it. Don't let anybody know. So we have been taught to ignore that and to push that down and not acknowledge, right? And take whatever you need to take to get through it. Great. So as an autistic person, all of those things are not ignorable. I can't put any of them to the back of my head. They are all equally important and equally sensed in the front of my brain, in a way. And so then I come into the voice studio, and you, my voice teacher, who I love and who I want to please, and especially if I'm a child, I want to please and I want to do my best for, because I love singing and I love being in the studio. You ask me to do something like, I don't know, breathe in a different way. You ask me to try this exercise that's going to help me to find the coordination to blend registration. You ask me to do some, I don't know, some squats while I'm reaching, while I'm singing high notes to, all of these things. You ask me to do all of these things. I cannot focus on what you're asking me to do. My senses are in complete overwhelm. And so what that looks like externally is I'm completely disengaged with you. I may not meet your eye. I may look like I am angry. I may seem belligerent because I can't do it. And so I'm trying hard and I'm just saying, no, I can't. And I don't have the words, especially as a child, I don't have the words to tell you that I can hardly even understand what you're saying. Your voice is barely breaking through this massive amount of information and perception that is coming through. Not only that, but I've been doing this all day, and now you're asking me to do this one other thing, and I love you, and I want to do what, like, I like you very much, and I want to do what you're asking me to do, and I love singing, but I cannot. And so that becomes, this singer is just so like, they never engage. The singer doesn't want, they don't want to be here. They are defiant. They tell me no, they'll never try anything. They're a bad student. That is one way that autism can show up in the voice studio in terms of our perception of autistic behavior. Another way is if someone is a sensory seeking, often this is associated a little bit more with possibly ADHD brains, but it also it can be part of an autistic brains. Sensory seeking, and also this ties in with proprioception. I don't know where I am in time and space because I don't have a good internal sense of what my body is doing. And I don't actually have a good internal sense or an effective internal sense of what my body needs or wants. And especially if you are a socialized female, because you don't get to have needs and wants, do you? So you really, we are really then in this place of like, not only can I not articulate what I need, but you're telling me that I need to expand my, perhaps expand my ribs to have a more complete inhalation. I can't tell whether my ribs are moving or not. I literally can't feel them. I don't know. Even when I'm looking in the mirror, I may not be able to see that my ribs are moving. You're asking me to change my tongue position so that I can have, a more clear E vowel. Front that tongue. Okay, I have no idea what that means. Not only as a neurotypical person, do I not necessarily know what front the tongue means or what that feels like in my body, but like, I don't know what my tongue is doing. I cannot sense it. And even when I'm looking in the mirror, I may not even be able to see it and or put the sense of it with my tongue. And so we get then folks who are not willing to try things. They just don't know their body. They don't know what's happening in their body. Every time I ask them what changed for you, they're like, I don't know. I don't know. And they're just bad students. They don't know what their body is doing. They're really bad actors because we call them really bad actors because, well, they're always like imitating and it's not a good imitation. They can't figure out, yeah, because they literally can't figure out when I say smile, I don't know what that means in my body. I don't know. So I'm constant, like my face might just look completely blank all the time. How do I get this kid to engage with the music? They might be engaging with the music so beautifully in ways that you are not, in ways that are unexpected to you, but you are saying that they're not engaging with the music, and maybe you perceive that they don't like singing. Maybe you perceive that they don't like taking lessons, when in fact they love it and they are engaging in a slightly different way. I'll tell you. Okay, we'll squirrel a little bit. I'll tell you, I was working with a young singer. This is going back a few years now. Who I had no diagnosis. I have no parents have not said anything to me. Singer has not said anything to me. I would not be surprised if they were autistic. No idea, no clue. They lovely singing voice, nice and clear, beautiful facility. Wanted to work in classical rep. So we were singing in German. We were singing An den Mond. I think it's Schubert. Tranquil gaze. Can only remember the English right now. Worldly casty pond. That song. And this singer's face, the way that this singer sang was as if they were not even in the room. You watch their face and you're like, they are not even here. I don't even know if they understand what they're doing. Like, it is like a robot. And then I asked the singer to draw me a picture. They were super into art. Draw me a picture of what this song means. I still have it framed on my wall downstairs. It's one of the most beautiful renderings. This singer absolutely understood and engaged with this text. 100% engaged with this text. It just did not look like what our expectations are in terms of how we express being engaged with the text.
Or what does that mean for the autistic singer who would really like to be in musical theatre or on the stage?
A couple of things. It means as voice teachers, and I think this is true no matter who we are working with. So always the things that we do to affirm neurodiversity and to create inclusivity in our teaching do not just affirm and support neurodivergent people. They affirm and support all of the singers we are working with. Yeah, our tendency when we're working with a singer who doesn't seem to engage or quote they seem to be a bad actor, or they seem to be not able to communicate, is to try to get them to imagine, right? We use all of our acting support, let's imagine, let's come up with really specific scenarios. Let's do a diary of this character beforehand, before they say, like, all of these are wonderful strategies. Don't get me wrong. And none of those things are going to be useful or very useful for many of the autistic folks in particular we work with, because there is a tendency to not understand or feel the connection between when I'm happy, I smile, or when I'm sad, and I'm putting this in very broad categories, but when I'm sad, my eyebrows go down, and this is what I do when I'm sad. I intuitively, as an holistic person, I intuitively have been able to develop those responses. I'm an expressive person, and that those responses, those external responses I develop those intuitively in response. I've done some training, of course, but like in response to the training, but also I respond well to, like, let's imagine a thing, and let's get specific about what you're doing, because I internally understand that this is the face that I make when I am, or these are the actions I take when I am happy, sad, whatever. And what is useful and effective when we're working with autistic people is to make that explicit. And this goes against some of what we might think of as student-led learning or student-centered learning. It goes a little bit against what we might think of as, upstream directive kind of things. Like it goes a little bit against what we might think of as acting, good acting, quote unquote, technique. And this is where we say a couple of different ways. One way is we look at recordings of professionals singing whatever the song is that you are singing, and we break it down and we say, what is their mouth doing here? What are their eyebrows doing here? What shape are their eyes here? Where is their hand? Which way is the hand facing? What are their knees doing? Or how far are their knees bent? Which way are their feet facing? Which way? We break it down so specifically. And then we come over to the mirror and we do it with our own hands. So we're seeing it and feeling it. So we go, what does it feel like to do? Remember what so-and-so did? Yes. The corners of the lips went up. Yes. How much teeth was showing? Amazing. So we do that here, and we start to then develop the external language or the connection externally between what I am expressing and like what I'm saying and what that looks like on my face or in my body. When we see non-autistic actors playing autistic or folks who are coded in an autistic way in movies and TV shows, what do? They tend to go into a little bit of robot and they stop their facial expressions and they, they their language loses, they tend to lose some of the fluidity and the prosody in their language. They start to go a little bit that way in the language. And we all know that that's coded for autistic or neurodivergence in a specific way. And autistic actors, yes, there may be some of that also present in their acting. But when we are specific and we understand and we use this explicit noticing and pointing out, that then is very much achievable in terms of like, oh, I understand that that's what my body is doing there. And then autistic folks get to make decisions about that, right? So autistic folks, all of us then, we get to make decisions around when I am doing these kinds of expressions and my eyebrows are down and I'm doing this with that is going to read in a specific way. And maybe I actually want to say something different. This is something that I, as a somewhat neurotypical person, can also learn from, even though I might intuitively be able to express what I'm feeling and intuitively be an intuitive actor in that way. Also, understanding that when I'm expressing, I don't know, happiness, to be so broad, but when I'm expressing, say, sadness, something really sad has happened to me, normally what I would do is that, broadly speaking, my eyebrows come down, my lips go forward, my head goes down a little bit, my hands might go forward, my shoulders might slump a little bit. But if I'm expressing sadness with like my lips are up a little bit and my eyebrows are down, so I'm at the same time, to see how now I'm sad, but I'm brave. Like, so I can communicate in a different way than what might just be my typical understanding of the communication. So this isn't necessarily just for autistic people in this way, right? This explicitness around understanding and saying what is actually happening can also be really useful for just anyone to be able to communicate and have other choices, to understand what they're doing and also have other choices.
We spoke about novelty for the when we were talking about ADHD and creating things that are new. And from what I've read about working with autistic people, having a structure seems to be quite useful, so they know what to expect, and any kind of divergent from that plan may seem unsettling. Is that still the case in the understanding?
Yes, that can be, absolutely. So I think what is important to understand is the reason that structure and routine is important to, perhaps more important to an autistic person, and also can be very important to someone who has experienced trauma, can be very important to someone who is young, for example. Like there are lots of people, again, who when we create these kind of structured systems, can be very useful. The reason that kind of structure and knowing what's happening in many cases for autistic people, that is useful, is a lifetime of not understanding what is expected of them, what is supposed to happen, what the appropriate actions are, what they're supposed to say. So there is a lifetime of trying to figure out the rules, especially around socialization, social behaviors, especially if you are a socialized female. There is a lifetime of trying to figure out the rules because our social rules are based on cues and me like reading your body language and me reading what is and understanding, what this means when I shrug my shoulders and I put my hands like this, that means that you're ready to stop the conversation. I know that intuitively when I am in a conversation with you. My son and my daughter, they both had to be told that when someone puts their hands like this or someone turns their shoulder to you, that means they would like to stop the conversation. And you can look and see that. And that, again, the explicitness of it gives them choices. Otherwise, they don't understand why something is happening. And because it's not explicit, and also neurotypical people, we tend to be really inexplicit in our language, right? We tend to be like, well, especially Canadians, British to a certain extent too. When we're socializing, where we're very polite, right, and a little bit self-deprecating, and so we say, especially if we've been socialized very much, we say things like, "Well, that was really great. I'm really glad to have seen you," and then we keep talking. Rather than, and in a lesson, the situation would be like, "That was so great today. I'm really glad." And then we keep talking. Autistic people are like, is this the end of the lesson? You said it was the end of the lesson, but you keep talking. What you're saying with your mouth doesn't make sense to me. So the explicitness of it. So now I'm in this situation where I think it's appropriate to just keep talking to you because that's what we're doing, right? I don't know what is appropriate here. So there's this immense anxiety. Oh, and then they're punished because oh God, you just talk so much. Just stop talking. Or they're punished because I, as the teacher, resent you because you never leave. I resent you because you never leave. When I have never communicated to you in a clear way, I've never said to you, it's the end of the lesson, it's time for you to go.
Okay, so is that a good way of kind of saying now we're going to go into this section of the lesson and now we're at the end, so we'll round up now.
Even round up now is pretty amorphous. What does that mean? Am I turning in a circle? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, yeah, I
Like,
get you.
what am I supposed to be doing? Yes, it's the end of your time. It's time for you to go. Clarity is kindness, right? Clarity is kindness. So in a building structure for children, building structure for autistic people, building structure for anyone so that we understand the expectations, that is kindness, right? That is the way to develop, to have a to have those clear expectations. Otherwise, as an autistic person is moving through the world not knowing when they're doing stuff wrong and constantly afraid that I'm going to be perceived in a way. I don't know when I said something that is like, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to say that thing. I didn't know that and so-and-so said that thing. I didn't know that it was inappropriate to say it now. They said it and everybody laughed. I didn't know. So the structure and building that environment is a way of creating a space where the expectations are really clear. This is also useful for ADHD folks. It's not about, for the novelty bit and the interest bit, it's not about necessarily having something surprise. It's about having space to have the novelty, right? So autistic folks tend to love to be able to choose all of the different, the same thing I was speaking about earlier. Here are all of the aspects of the lesson, all of the different things we could do today. Which one would you like to start with? In my experience, autistic folks love that. It's not that it's unstructured, because there is a structure there. I know what the things are that are going to be happening today, and I get to choose. An ADHD person, what we might include for an ADHD person, or what we might say to an autistic person, you get to choose whichever ones you want and maybe only choose 4 out of the 5. Or an ADHD person, we might include something like make up a dance. An ADHD person, what we might include for an ADHD person, or what we might say to an autistic person, you get to choose whichever ones you want and maybe only choose 4 out of the 5. Or an ADHD person, we might include something like make up a dance to your new favorite song, something along those lines. The focus thing and the interest-based thing for typically for ADHD people, the interest-based thing is interest. I learn as much about it as I can and I drop it in a second. So we get lots and lots of great like started projects and lots of, interests that are fun. And that's the thing that keeps me going. Autistic people tend to go deep dive. So you can come into the interest of an autistic person, but anybody, it's not just autistic people, right? But anybody, by figuring out what motivates them, right? What is that special interest? If you are super interested in Pokemon, there
Yes.
are lots and lots of songs about Pokemon that
Yes.
you can make into an exercise.
I've been doing that a lot with a student who really likes Pokemon. We do a new Pokemon tongue twister, and then to help them with their literacy side, we then say, go grab your Pokemon book. Let's see if we can find the character in the book. And
I
they seem to
love
really
it.
love doing that.
Yes. And for this song, how would Snorlax sing it?
I'm not cool enough to know the
Let's
Pokemon, so I've had to do some
pull one out.
research.
Yeah. Pull one out of there, right? Like I only know Snorlax is my kid's favorite, but or which one is your favorite? Amazing. How would they sing this song? How would they sing this verse? What would happen if they were doing it, right? Like, yeah, we're really like just motivating through interest, because that is that's how we get engagement and buy-in, of course, right? Through interest. And the ADHD interest tends to change a little bit more rapidly. One of the things that I have come to terms with for myself is that, I've had an agenda, like a calendar agenda, written agenda, since I was very, very young. And I get caught up in a new one. I don't know, recently a little less often, but I've tried every agenda on the planet and every single bojo, like bullet, I've tried them all at some point or another. Ask me which one. I've done Panda. I've done them all at some point. And I came to terms with that because I said, I actually want to have an agenda. It works for me to do zero-based scheduling, to do some of this scheduling in this way. The only way that I'm going to actually keep an agenda is by having a new one every 6 months. And that's okay. So I get a new one every 6 months. I get a new system. I spend like however long setting it all up. It's very exciting to me. It's great. And then I like use that for as long as it keeps me interested. And when I see a new one, I'm like, oh, that's exciting. So I've stopped being mad at myself for having to have a new thing all the time and never sticking with a system, right? I've stopped being mad with myself because the system is the thing I want. And if I have to do a new thing every time to get that system, that's
And
fine.
maybe that is the system.
And that
itself.
is right. That's the thing that gets me the thing I want. So that's the thing I'm going to do, right? And again, it's the same thing in the studio. If we're working with folks and that's the other thing, we don't have to know that they're ADHD to work that way. We don't have to know that they're autistic to work that way. If you're working with an adult who is into Pokemon, we don't have to know though, right? So you've kind of figured out, okay, this is a super interest of this person, and this is a thing that's going to motivate them and keep them like singing and keep them interested in doing an exercise or keep them interested in finding a new coordination. Perfect. That's like, I don't need to know whether you're autistic or just a kid. I don't need to know that. Like just a neurotypical kid who happens to have an interest in Pokemon, whatever. Like, I don't need to know. Because I can, when I'm supporting folks in ways where, again, I'm looking for those interests, I'm understanding what it means to set up studios so that there are lots of different options and they are all affirmed. One of the things that I think is an easy quote, an easy inclusivity thing that is possible to do is to have fidget toys or tools, right? Just have them all there. Have a whole basket of them on your piano. Folks will self-select. They will come in and grab whatever they feel, folks will, and it's there. The other thing that is really even more affirming is to say, we love fidget toys or tools, I call them tools, but we love fidget tools in the voice studio. We love movement in the voice studio. If you or your child has something that they love using to help to, stimulate. There's a lot of reasons that fidget toys are amazing. If you or your child has something like that, please bring them into the studio and show them, like, let's have them with us. That would be amazing. If you love stuffies, that's great. Bring your stuffy in. Let's sing with your stuffy. I also have this whole basket of stuffies for anybody who might want to, stuffed animals, you know what I mean, right? Yeah. For anybody who might want to try out some of mine when they're in the studio. You love having a weighted vest on while you're singing? That's amazing. Weighted vest can be really useful for folks with proprioception, and also it can help you to feel where I am in time and space. You love using one of those? That's amazing. I have two in my studio. If you want to use it while you're singing, you can, or not. It's up to you. So the option is there, and parents and singers know right from the beginning, I can bring it or not, and it's actually there. So we've got all of these sort of things that are just part of the studio setup. We talk about as well having one wall in the studio that is pretty blank so that it allows for, and is maybe a calming color or a solid color. So it kind of allows for folks who are overstimulated to have a place to just look and or have their eyes closed. And one wall that is all bookshelves with or posters with every color and shape imaginable on it, so that folks who need a little bit more visual intake can look at that while they're singing. So you have options, right? You have options to, like, change the lighting in the studio. You have options to open and close windows and blinds. You have options. I mean, all of these options, and you're offering them to them. What do you think about the lighting in the studio? Do you love it? What would you, if you could change anything about the lighting, what would you change? Folks don't always know that they can ask for these things. So you can say, how is the sound level in the studio? Is there anything that is sticking out for you in terms of sound level? And they might not have realized until you said it. Oh, you know what? The fan from the computer is really loud. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can move the computer. If I need to use it for teaching, fine. Let me just see if I can move the computer to the end, and I'll just grab it like to the other side of the room, and I'll just see what I can do about that. Or next time, maybe I'll bring in my iPad, work from the iPad rather than my laptop, if that is something that is, distracting for you. I'm just saying, we're offering options, and also we're making the options explicit. We're saying, is there something that you can hear? Is there something that you would change about the light? Is there something you would change about whatever?
And what about the student with Tourette syndrome? And it's really great that artists like Lewis Capaldi have come out and shared their experiences with this. And we've seen it happening on stage for him as well. How might this present? And I guess I'm also thinking about stimming, and I don't know whether that's also part of the autistic experience, but particularly if stimming is vocal or like part of like a throat clearing thing. How can we help with that? Is it our place to manage it? Are we, from what I've read, it's a case of don't try to change it because it's a coping thing.
Yeah, 100%. As with all stems, in some cases, these are stems, often sort of like the arm flapping, like the sort of typical kind of things that we associate with autism, arm flapping, sometimes blinking, pacing. Pacing can be a stem. Some of those stems are about being able to manage energy, I actually need to be able to do that in order to feel where I am in time and space. I'm getting some sense of where I am and what the space is around me. So that's a proprioception thing, which is only going to help you as a singer to be able to, if I'm managing where I am in time and space. Things like throat clearing, sometimes actual vocal sounds can be part of, not just throat clearing, but perhaps a sigh, sometimes an actual grunt, some actual vocal sounds can be part of a stimming or part of a coping way of being in the world, I think. And so what we do is, first of all, we normalize, we say in our policies, we send out emails to our studios and we say, we love movement in the studio because singing and music is movement. There's nothing stationary about singing. There's nothing stationary about creating music. Music is movement and energy, literally. So we love that in the studio. And we embrace movements, any movements that will allow you to feel like you are engaging in the way you want to engage. And so then, if we have someone who is stimming, that becomes part of our vocal exercise, right? That becomes part of, if I've got flapping, that is part of, let's see if we can do inhalations, rhythmic inhalations with the flapping. Let's see what kind of, let's see how fast or slow we can do it. And we're explicit about it. We say, I notice that your arms are doing lots of movement. What would you like to, how would you like to incorporate that in the singing we're doing today? I notice that you're doing lots of pacing. You love the pacing? Amazing. Can we do some rhythmic work along with the pacing? So you're stomping, amazing. Let's stomp. And now let me also, are there any songs that you feel are, that you love to sing along in with the rhythm of this pacing? And also I'm going to figure out a few songs that are going to, talk about, that are going to be about this rhythm as well. And maybe a couple of steps higher and a couple steps lower. And we're going to figure out some of those songs that are kind of rhythmic in nature. Vocal sounds, if we're doing some throat clearing, all we're saying is, I notice you're clearing your throat. Let me know when you feel ready to sing. Also, I'm going to normalize it for you. I'm not going to say, oh gosh, be really careful, or I don't want to see. And I'm also not going to ignore. This is the thing too, right? Where we feel like, oh gosh, am I supposed to say anything? Should I say anything? No, the person in front of you knows that it's happening, right? They know that that's happening. And the more that I try to sort of like pretend it's not happening, the more patronizing in a way that is, and the more embarrassing it can be for the person who is stimming. So I'm going to normalize that. I'm going to say, I notice that you're clearing your throat a lot, whether or not they have Tourette's. They may not have Tourette's, they may be clearing their throat a lot. If they do not have Tourette's and they're clearing their throat a lot, then I notice you're clearing your throat a lot. What are some ways that we can see if we can change the throat clear to maybe an H or something? How would that feel for you? So that we're just kind of changing the behavior slightly. If it's Tourette's, probably not going to change anything. Or you can say, hey, what would it feel like for you to do like an H instead of a throat clear? I'm wondering. See what happens. Also, I love that you're clearing your throat and no problem at all. And also, if you would like to clear your throat in the middle of a song, that's what's going to happen. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to work together to like clear your throat and make it part of the whatever you're singing.
From a vocal health point of view, of course, I understand all of that things that you've been saying. What are your thoughts on doing something like a bit of bubble work in the middle? Like, okay, there's some throat clearing. Let's pop some bubble work in there in case there's some aggravation. Obviously, not saying those words to make it a bad thing, but in your own mind, thinking, okay, there's a lot of throat clearing. Maybe we should put some form of bubbling therapeutic work in there to go hand in hand.
It's really easy to view behaviors from a purely, this is going to harm you, this is good, right? This is good and this is bad behavior. And from that sort of purely like, I've got to fix the thing, it's really easy to sort of slip into that, especially with something that we know can cause irritation. We know throat clearing can cause irritation. It can be challenging for the folds. However, when you're working with someone who is clearing their throat as part of a stim or a vocal stim, this is something they've been doing for a long time. This is something that is part of the way that they use their voice. Unless they want to be an opera singer where they have to have absolutely pristine folds, and even in some cases they do not. Suddenly you'd be surprised what happens with vocal folds, right? Unless they're going into a profession, like a professional voice user profession, for example, if they're going to be a teacher, if they're going to be, well, a lawyer, where they're going to be using their voice as a profession. So unless they are planning to use their voice in that very specific kind of way, I am really cautious about addressing from a vocal health point of view. What I love to do is offer some options. So throat clearing, right? And even when they're going into professional voice, I'm not necessarily offering a vocal health. I'm offering options. So throat clearing, as we know, we're going to be explicit about it. Here's what happens when we clear the throat, the vocal folds really smash together. And you've been doing it your whole life, and your folds, you're singing the way you want to sing, and you sound the way you want to sound, and that's amazing. So I'm not saying stop doing it in any way, shape, or form. What I am saying is you may want to incorporate some bubbling. You may want to incorporate some straw work. You may want to incorporate some tongue trills, whatever, to help your folds and help the larynx to just kind of reset every once in a while, so that the throat clearing doesn't lead to a tension pattern where you're locked into only using that. What we want is for you to have options. We want for you to have lots of ways to use your voice. And one of the ways that you are currently using your voice is in this pattern, and that's absolutely fine. Let's make sure that you have the option to continue to use it that way if you want to, and also you know how to have a reset in there. It's exactly the same as when we're working with, music theater someone a rock singer, for example, who is doing lots of belt rock, high pressurized singing, however you want to call it, whatever, mode one, whatever language you are going to use, high pressurized singing is exactly the same. I'm not going to tell you not to do that sound ever. I'm going to say, hey, there are some things that you can do to reset. So perhaps using some head voice, upper voice, flow, phonation, all of the quotes, whatever, to explore the opposite of that sound so that you have options and so that you can continue to. The other thing that I'm going to offer is I want you to know, as a singer and as a voice user, I want you to understand when you might want to pull out the straw or do some bubbling, when you can self-assess that the throat clearing has, or whatever habit, maybe you've just talked for a long time. I want you to be able to self-assess when you want to do that reset. So just because you're throat clearing, for example, doesn't mean that you need to do this. But what are the things that will tell you? How do you know when you want to have a reset? How do you know when the voice feels like it needs the reset? Rather than, I can tell you're clearing your throat lots, you should do bubbling, which is not what you said at all. And also I want to just make sure that I'm really clear about the ramifications of coming to things, especially if it's a stim, coming to things from a sort of protective, I want to be protective kind of way. Because again, that comes back to patronizing, that comes back to sort of student-centered, teacher-centered, it comes back to I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you what to do. Versus the reason I'm the expert is because I'm going to give you some options. Got lots of options. Yeah.
And we've spoken a lot about the singer themselves, and that's great. We really want to be student centered as much as possible. But just putting the spotlight on the neurodiverse teacher or the teacher themselves, like you have been very open about your experiences. Can these things apply I mean, we're talking about applying it to everybody, so all of these ideas can apply to the teacher who might find themselves teaching and having these things of, being quite sensitive to the light and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, teaching while neurodivergent is one of the classes that I do as well. And or a panel, sorry, excuse me, a panel. And I invite one of my autistic colleagues who is a voice teacher and business owner to come in, and we do a panel around like just what have we done to support ourselves, and to be as affirming of our own neurodiversity and our own neurodivergences as we can be. And yeah, I think the main thing is that once you have a diagnosis, once you understand that you may be neurodivergent in a specific way, part of the lifting of the shame and or the validation that comes in is looking back and seeing all of the ways that you actually did support yourself and starting to then lean into those intentionally. Exactly like I was talking about with the agendas and having it clear. So seeing all of those things along the way, my autistic colleague talks about how she didn't enjoy teaching. I might be speaking out of turn now. I can't remember whether it was the amount of time per day or whether it was a specific time of the day or whether it was an environment, but there was something about the studio, and I think it had to do more with the timing than it did with the environment, but I can't quite remember. And she always felt badly because she thought, well, everybody else does it, and I just have to drag myself to do it, and I hate it. And then when she realized, like when she started to be like, oh, I understand why I hate this. I'm overwhelmed by that time. Or, I've had a whole day of trying to do this thing, and now I'm trying to do this thing. She just changed her scheduling model. Perfect, right? Like, so you start to, so okay, that's a change that I need. So if I'm an autistic person, I mean, it also comes back to just recognizing who you are as a teacher and then leaning into your values, right? So if I'm an autistic person who is fully focused on one kind of singing or one kind of style of singing, great. That's the kind of singing that you should advertise that you teach, right? That's market that, and don't feel like you are not a great person because you're not teaching other styles. Like you don't have to teach other styles, but that really also doesn't necessarily apply to simply like if you're autistic or neurodivergent, like understand who you are, what you love, and then build your business around that. I mean, that's a whole like business side of things too, but build your teaching and business around that.
Around that, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm the same with music exams. It's just not something that I'm totally interested in doing. So, it's just the same as somebody who just would be better off teaching in the mornings and in the afternoons. That's just a preference and what works best for you. Yeah. Dr. Shannon Coates, thank you so much. It's been awesome to chat with you over this last couple of weeks. Thank you for doing a real big deep dive into how we can make our studios as inclusive for everybody, so they feel welcome. Everyone feels welcome to come and work with us and feels catered for. That's really what we want, isn't it? What's coming up for you? What can we look out for and get in touch with you about?
Well, that is a great question. In April, the end of April, I don't have the dates set yet, but it will be the end of April. I am doing Inclusive Voice Studios, so that is a one for anyone who, if you are interested in what we're talking about here, This is a more specific introduction to, I go into executive function quite a bit as well, and what that looks like. And so that's one to look out for. And then sometime in the next couple of months, Nikki Loney and I are going to do a play-based learning and student-led learning sort of workshop together. So that'll be in the late spring. So we'll see.
Excellent. Nice. And where can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, everything is at drshannoncoates.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be with you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks so much, Alexa.